so I'm Josh Way. I mean, I've been in technology for about 20 years. And so I joined TEKMATE almost 2 years now as first a consultant to help them turn around with some issues they were having in the business and sort of becoming this managed service provider in IT. And so what we've done over the last couple of years is become a strategic technology partner with customers. And I know that that's an overused term, but it's really truthful for us because I bring that consulting side and that business strategy side. So as a company, TEKMATE very much loves to work with their customers at the business level, understanding really their business model. We dive right into the finances. We talk about a lot of things that a lot of IT companies either are afraid to talk about or just have no clue about in regards to business management. In fact, a lot of them are struggling themselves in that area. So that's the real short snippet of it. But we provide specifically cybersecurity, business continuity, operational productivity help. For example, back in the old days, we would say something like, hey, looks like your users have like one monitor. So we will say, hey, put another monitor. That was like back like when we first started in IT. That was like insane that people would ever put an extra monitor on their desktop. But now we talk about, okay, well, how productive are you managing? Are you measuring any of that productivity? And then we get into all kinds of different conversations around that, which would take some time to get into, but it's been fun. It's been a fun 2 years, almost 2 years.
I actually love where you're going, because when we first met, you said kind of the same thing. You're like, look, we want to be more, and I think, I don't know if the term was a little bit more of an offensive technology partner, where we're actually helping people score points, go out, meet and meet their goals and be productive. Can you drill down into maybe a couple places where if you meet a brand new prospect, brand new client, where you tend to see if there's a pattern where there's the biggest opportunity for them to make that improvement in their business? Like, what would be the kind of low-hanging fruit if there's something you run into more often than not, where people can kind of benefit from your help?
That's a wide question, only because we deal with such a wide gamut. So I would start with right now in the current conditions is cybersecurity. I mean, everybody's talking about cybersecurity right now, and that again is a wide gamut. So many small businesses don't need that uber depth and expense on like every endpoint being protected by a very stringent, piece of software that costs a lot of money. So what we do is, we try to figure out exactly what it is they do need, fitting in with their business model, their budget, and their total outcomes. So again, what we try to do, and not to kind of politically answer that question, but every client has a very unique sort of thing that they need or that they want to see. And when we talk about low-hanging fruit, if I were to sort of pick the maybe, I don't know, I guess it's kind of hard to say, because we really don't have a way of going in there and saying, what's the first thing we need to grab on a sales level, most certainly. First, we just ask a lot of questions. Some of them are standard, and some of them are some things that we learn while we ask the standard questions. We get sort of like, oh, look, we can ask this question now about this customer. Because if we just had like a script, it wouldn't work. And we would come across like every other tech company. So I would say like low-hanging fruit, if we were to say that, would be definitely right now, cybersecurity and business continuity. Simply means keeping the business up and running if something were to happen on the cybersecurity side, or just accidentally speaking, or weather. We live in Florida, so we get a lot of clients that are concerned about weather at certain times of the year, depending on where they are and what kind of building they have. And so we point that out, and certainly it is a bit of a sale, but we don't do it for just the sale. We want to make sure that they're up and running, and we care about the community. So we don't want businesses going out of business after a big storm. We just don't. And so that's a big deal for us.
So I can see how from a uptime standpoint, keeping people up, active, productive, making sure that their systems are going. Do you guys have, areas where there's, people are lagging in one way or another, where there's, I can understand if they don't have a cybersecurity solution in place, but like you gave the example, I think before we hit record around, or maybe it was when we get started, around people having one or two monitors, and I know that for some people, there are like studies out there, 50% increases in productivity.
I know, depending on the industry, it's real.
And what you're doing, right? I mean, if you have to have 6 applications open at a time, and 2 of them are just for viewing and 2 are for working, like it does make a difference. Are there anything, even if they're just tips, little things that you guys do, or like the 2 monitor type of example that you would share or point to and say, like, these are things a lot of people are not doing or could be?
Well, if we're talking about IT tips, I wouldn't even be the best guy anymore, because like what I focus on mostly is the business itself. I focus on how we can ultimately make sure that they reach the outcomes they're looking for. And many companies don't know what even outcomes mean, because they're, unless you're talking to a healthcare company, and even they get confused, because outcomes to them are in terms of patient care and patient outcomes. So in terms of, we're talking in terms of business outcomes. So that in and of itself is a little bit different for me. But I would say right now, if I were to look at a company on a purely IT level, if I were walking in and making a decision or trying to make a decision as to the kinds of things that we would change, is just making sure, first of all, that their technology is up to date. I mean, that is something lately that we've started to see, and that's really just a result of going out there and talking to people. We're starting to see a lot of people with like 10-year-old computers, and that's kind of interesting to us a little bit too, because we're thinking, wow, I mean, do they really need brand new computers, or they've survived on this? So we have to ask those questions and be very honest with ourselves and not just look for a sale opportunity. But I would say that productivity wise, I mean, computing has come a long way, and we're like in this new session of or this new sort of season of, hey, look, we get to play with computers again, like actual computers, like end user computers, even servers from time to time when they're not cloud. Of course, we love the cloud and to play in that area and try to get people to convert when it makes sense. But even then, we bought a server for a client who's like, we really don't need an entire cloud solution. And in fact, it would be more expensive for them. But we just back it up on our business continuity system, and that's all cloud-based. And so they have a server. Those are fun to play with. And still, I guess, at least for our guys, it is. Sometimes you want to get under the hood and play with the hardware. We're still kind of techie that way. Yeah. So,
yeah, the devices and the aging devices thing is interesting too. For me, I was on a 6-year-old computer with the screen hanging on for a while, and it was actually not bothering me until it started to freeze a little bit. And then you think about it, and it's like, okay, well, if this thing's freezing for 10 minutes twice a day, yep, and I have to like stop and restart and do everything, I'm like, okay, I think I can afford to spend $1,000 on a faster machine. But I mean, that's not a unique scenario. I think almost every business, particularly not, everyone has people working across devices, maybe their own laptops at home in many cases, maybe just the laptop that was pulled out of the drawer that was given to them when they came on board.
Well, we were really expecting cloud computing at the endpoint level, the end user level, to kind of take a little more of a hold than it has, and it hasn't. It's flat out. People are still buying computers to work locally on a lot of localized files, even if their files are backed up or in the cloud, or they're working on a cloud-based solution on a web browser. Still have a localized computer that has a little bit of power. Now, we don't need as much power if we're really fully web-based, but we still need some. Our browsers are taking up more power than ever these days. Chrome went from taking 6 gigs of data to like 13 gigs on some computers, depending on how many apps are running in the background. For me, as a consultant, as I mentioned, I'm a consultant as well. My clients, in software, they have web apps running. They have to have beastie machines, and they're on web apps 90% of the time. And so that, just because you're on the web doesn't mean that you don't need something with power anymore. And it's really unfortunately a fallout of security problems with browsers over the years. And Google has done a great deal of work on their Chromium, their Chromium platform, and you see Microsoft has moved to it. So that could go off into another conversation, but at the end of the day, this is what we're seeing out there, and those are the I feel like we're going back in time in a bit, working on things we used to work on that we weren't working on for many years. We were really focused on get to the cloud. And now we're working on end user, and really, again, it comes down to sort of like, what is the user's experience, right? Are they able to get their job done? Which again, for us, we're a jobs done mentality. Our whole marketing shtick is around getting jobs done, helping people get jobs done, and so on. So, without getting too deep into the rabbit hole, it's all interconnected, and that's why it's difficult to answer a question of low-hanging fruit. By the way, mainly because of the fact that, man, it's just so intertwined with business. IT is like everything.
Yep. And I don't know if this is actually an example or not, but I feel like in your scenario, if I dealt with a client and that's the approach I was taking, and I found out, for example, they were still sending or doing physical contracts and hadn't moved to like e-signatures. I mean, I feel like there's still some of that's got to be out there.
100%.
Let's take it down a little bit to you and your kind of how you operate. I'm always curious to find out, like, sort of in one way, what does your week look like? But even a level up from that, how do you prioritize and stay productive? Like, how do you know that you're working on the right thing every day? And so what are some of the, whether they're routines, habits, best practices, kind of North Stars, whatever the thing is that you use, how does Josh kind of get his stuff done? Like, what are some of your tools?
I'm going to be 100% with you. Not that I wouldn't be anyway. I hate when people say like, I'll be honest with you and all this other crap, but I'm just, just to lay it out there. I mean, I have a team, and without my team, I'm a very busy person, as an owner or as a founder. I've been both and sometimes at the same time, it's like for different companies. And so, yeah, when things start to get so complicated, I am very much the type that tries to simplify things, but I'm also an engineer, or was an engineer. And so I do kind of unravel the complexity first. So I see all the things. So my standard mode of operation is to let me understand as much as I can that's within reason in my wheelhouse and where I can make the most difference in an organization. And then let's attack that and organize that based on, maybe let's first, if it deals with high level business stuff, let's understand that it's still connecting to the vision. I mean, that's something we tend to kind of, we put in place and we kind of put it out there. A lot of businesses, they write it in, on a plaque, who knows, whatever it is, they get it in their minds, and hopefully the businesses, the rest of the company understands the vision. I mean, that's the dream, right? But at whatever pace, I'm always trying to make sure that we are still providing for the vision, I guess, maybe that's a term. And then of course, strategy is my biggest thing. So executing on the strategic kind of functionality that we've put in place. So strategic functionality for me would be like a framework, like, do we have a strategic framework for this particular organization? So in the case of TEKMATE, we do. We use our business model canvas to kind of go back to and understand sort of what our value propositions are, make small adjustments or tweaks to pricing, to all the small things. So in order to get my day done, I relied very heavily on the team to help me prioritize where we need to go on a literally, like you said, a week to week basis. We have daily huddles and weekly huddles, monthly huddles that have different purposes, and so those help me stay on track. So a lot of communication. We use tools like Teams. I'm not a huge fan of email, so I'm very focused when it comes to email. I'm very picky as to how I use email. It's a whole nother ball of wax to unravel, but we do use a system called Nerdwise for, that's very popular in the MSP space and the IT MSP space. And that does, that's more for ticketing and more for project management and all the things customer facing. But we also use it for some bigger internal, objectives and things like that. So we can keep track. We don't really projectize anything internally yet. We're not really that big. We call them micro projects sometimes. But those get managed pretty live. We're still small enough to be agile in that sense. So, but tasks, are big for us. We are pretty traditional, I guess, in a way when it comes to getting tasks done. But I rely heavily on my team to make sure that I'm on it. Accountability is huge here. Big fans of this radical transparency idea that has been pushed out over the years, especially for books like Principles by Ray Dalio. Some really cool ideas that people are starting to latch onto in smaller businesses. It's hard to do because it takes a culture that can take that kind of beating where you're able to say something super honest and be 100% truthful like all day long. And we don't enjoy the persistent liars. We get those sometimes through when we do hires, and we realize I don't think we're getting the whole picture here. And so that's a fit problem.
On that, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I often use this analogy that it's if I have to point to something that needs to be fixed, it's not. It'll say it's you. I'm going to say it's not you, Josh. It's the company that's the problem. I just need your help fixing this problem. Or it's like it's not. It's not you, the salesperson. It's actually we're not being productive on the sales side. So how can we fix that? I always try to separate it, and I don't know that I think that's at least where I start on those things.
I think for us, what we do is we just have a great deal of accountability in regards to, like, we also reference the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which is a big deal for us. I mean, it's something I've carried with me through my consulting, and that helps me, on a personal level, really to say, okay, where do all of my business relationships, all of our personal relationships start on a really a baseline of trust, and then everything else above, kind of goes up. So you need to have healthy conflict next in order to get results and all those things. So we really don't have a problem with healthy conflict here. So we don't also have a problem connected to that saying, Jen, you dropped the ball on that. Let me see if I can help you. Like, because she knows I'm not coming from an area of attack. She knows that she can trust me with that, but I'm also pointing it out very specifically that, hey, it looks like, I dropped the ball. And certainly we take responsibility for our own, and that's popular, right? And you should do that. Responsibility is a massive word that means a lot of things. I think people could probably learn from that, but learn more about that, I should say, and their specific sort of place in life. But for us internally here at TEKMATE, I mean, we're still learning a lot about this. I mean, I'm saying this like we got this all together. It is absolutely not that. But what I am telling you is that it's important to be able to say the truth the way it is. That way, there's no ambiguity in our conversation, so we can move on and get those outcomes we're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to tack this on and then I have another question. The people say there's 3 perspectives: yours, others, and the truth.
Yeah. Bro, I'll tell you, the truth is massive. It's everything. It really, truly is.
Yeah, we actually, I learned this from a sales coach at one point years ago, and Coop and I still reference it, and we call it the Truth Serum. And it's like, if something is not going right, and even if it's with a client, if it's internally, if it's anywhere, just go right for it. Just hit them with the Truth Serum. Hey, Josh, look, I know things aren't working out the way that they were supposed to, and I'm not happy about it either. And suddenly the Truth Serum, everybody's like, okay, like we're not, and so I love that. I love going at things with the Truth Serum sometimes. I mean, if you need to, right? Hopefully you can.
Well, at the end of the day, as long as you're respectful and kind, and still with that truth and that, sometimes you can hit hard with a lot of kindness or respectfulness. And of course, when you enter the arena, so to speak, that engagement arena in that healthy conflict situation, that's what makes it healthy, is that kindness, that respect, and that understanding and trust. So just with that said, I wanted to put a period on it because that's an important part of it. We're not going after it to be rough and be tough and look like, oh man, these guys can talk tough to each other. How do they do that? No.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just like a sport, and I love the analogy between business and sports. Like, you gotta, at the end of the day, it's just about getting the points, scoring the goals. Like, there's no emotions. I mean, yes, you can be excited when you win and sad when you lose. That's great, but when it comes down to doing it and how well it's happening, you have to play the game, be as good as you can. Give your best.
Yeah, emotions have their place. It's just not always in the right place. That's what we have to, as leaders, we have to hopefully drive.
Well, so this slide, this goes towards the next question, which is one of my favorites, and it can be, you can take it from either angle. Has there ever been like a piece of advice that or a learning that has helped you, kind of guided you, either some advice somebody has given you or something you've learned that has been, either the best advice you've ever heard or that you would give yourself if you went back in time and said, hey, 20-year-old Josh, you should know these things, right? Or the flip side would be, what's like the worst advice that you've heard in your life? Because I've had those experiences, but I think it's kind of fun. Do you have anything that's really kind of, that you would impart to yourself, or that you've.
Yeah, I have 2 pieces that are literally a tie because they're constantly both kind of together, but they're not really the same thing. And if you allow me to kind of give you 2 for the best advice, because one's really short and simple, and we've kind of already touched on it, so we don't have to get into it. But the first one that's for some reason just really stuck with me when I was when my first MSP I had started, we're getting our first kind of big client, and the CEO, it was actually as chief restructuring officer. We became very good friends after this engagement. But the thing he kept saying at the meeting we first met was, I don't know what I don't know. This was in the middle of he's a restructuring officer. So we're in the middle of this big bankruptcy turnover of, I don't know what it was, a 40 or $50 million company. Maybe it was less than that, but it was a big deal in this small area. So, and it was one of the most well-known imaging companies in the area. And thankfully it worked out for the community. We didn't lose those imaging centers totally. And, he did a good job of managing it forward with the court process, but I was involved in the IT process, which they had a absolute nightmare to deal with. So when we came in there as a team, I say I mostly because of the fact that I'm the one that kind of took the responsibility of that account. And really he came to me as like, I want you to run this. And so I was like, okay, I don't normally do that, but he just kept saying, I don't know what I don't know. And there's a little bit of attachments I learned later on from Ray Dalio. It was like, I know there are things I need to know. I just need to figure out how I can get to know them, what I need to know. So there's this sort of this more of stretched version of that. But just not knowing what you don't know, that helps me, because then I know my clients are all like that. And then I'm like that. I'm like going, well, there are absolutely things I need to know that I don't know, that I know I need to know. And then I need to figure out how to get there, to get to that information. So yeah. I could probably come up with a cool, creative way to make that sound markety, but it's really helpful to just have that understanding. And so it's not really a piece of advice. It's just, maybe I'm giving it and saying that that is a fact. Like, you are in that situation as an owner, as a founder, as an employee, as anyone who is getting things done or need to get things done. That's a real fact of the matter, right? And the other one is just tell the truth. Like, that one to me is just, is really difficult because, as a kid, I grew up in I had a pretty bad background, a pretty rough background in some cases. And so, we got around just BSing all the time, and that was how you survived, and it's a sad state because, man, I'll tell you, I mean, that's how I got out of that situation in a big way, was just telling the truth, learning to tell the truth. And so that right there has been it's sort of a moniker in the back of my mind all the time, is like, a filter, hopefully, to, well, when I want to bloat something or want to sell something, is it completely and utterly the truth? And that's been, I'm not going to say it's always easy, even now as someone who's been in this game a while, but those are the two pieces that I would say advice-wise.
They're definitely good ones, and I think it takes, they both take maturity. I hopefully people arrive there at some point early in their life.
Yes.
But not knowing what you don't know
in my 20s.
it does take, it does take that maturity to kind of like, you have to skid your knees a couple times, and find out like, oh, you have to have that lesson where you're like, oh, I thought I knew myself, and I thought I knew what I was doing so well, and realize, and then when that happens maybe twice, then I think you kind of are in the club of, you don't know what you don't know.
That's true.
A different kind of expression of it is humble pie. Some people are just, you have to earn it through lessons, and then you can be humble and understand you don't actually have all the facts, all the information.
Well, here's one side thing to that, if I may. I mean, the idea of, like, for TEKMATE, we have this in our marketing gear, in our marketing stuff, we have a thing about alignment, right? This radical alignment connected internally. Internally, we call it radical transparency for us. Then for our clients, it's radical alignment, which includes that too for them. But how can you really have alignment with someone if you're absolutely not telling the truth and they're not telling the truth? You never are truly aligned, and that will fall apart. It will show its ugly face at some point, or it will deteriorate at its weak points. And at the end of the day, if we're doing this and we're practicing this and we're filtering what we say, what we do as well, and as a follow through and integrity and all those things that go with it. But this is how we also earn a deeper trust with those who we do business with and have long-term relationships with, where we're both profitable and that we're both getting great outcomes. So at the end of the day, that's part of what drives these alignments that get to these outcomes. So I wanted to say that.
I think I'm hearing a core value somewhere in there. that's like a core value. I think we just for the people, companies really search for those and develop that, put so much time and energy and put them together. And I've done this exercise a number of times, and I always kind of I'm a big fan of version 1.0 to get to 2. Mm-hmm. And so I've put it up there, and I'm like, all right, those can be our values for now, but we'll just see, but that sounds like one that's really.
So if I see a plaque on the wall, I ask the person, so is this telling me you figured it out, or you're figuring it out? And I always love it when they're honest and say, we're always figuring it out. And I love that. And when they say, no, this is what we are, I'm like, okay. I'm not going to hold them any worse. I'm not going to value them less. I'm just going to say, okay.
They don't know what they don't know.
That's it. Boom. That's great.
Well, Josh, this has been great. Anything else that you want to add about TEKMATE? And then I would love if you could tell us how best for people to get a hold of you. What's the best way to get a hold of you in TEKMATE? But anything else you want to add, and then send us off with how we can get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that as far as I don't really have anything to add. I mean, we had this little jobs to be done approach thing that I kind of mentioned before, which I think is important. But we can all obviously have another go round someday and talk about that stuff, because I think if you get into some of this, and it really kind of shines a light on what most businesses, services especially, should be doing for companies, or helping people get a job done. But what does that really mean? There's a company called Strategine that has really just taken this and created an entire business model around it. It's been around a long, long time. But the idea is that, for us, we've kind of wrapped around this whole marketing terms, these marketing words around just, different, dominant, disruptive, and discrete. And we'll just say, all the other ones are pretty simple except discrete. And that sometimes is like, what do you mean by that? And that is that we really are fully focused on strategic partnerships with the individuals we work with, the individual customer, the company. If they have a vision statement or a vision that really is like kind of like palatable, I can actually take it, or tangible, I can work with it and touch it, then we buy into that. We try to, at least. And if we're not a fit, we'll know pretty quickly. And we move on, and we have no problems with that. So if I add anything, I wanted that to be something that's important to know, that jobs to be done is that whole approach is a big deal. But again, that could be a conversation that could be edited for another day, because it is pretty deep and wide. As for getting a hold of me, I mean, tekmate.com, we are tek-mate.com, and we have a little place right down there at the bottom of the site that you can just reach out and say hello. And that's pretty much the way to get a hold of us, and we'll get that, and we get it in multiple inboxes. So if there's any questions, or if anybody's interested in knowing more about what we're about and what we do, I always like to talk about it anyway. If we're always looking for customers. We're always looking for people that buy into what we do. And I think that's why Nerdwise has been so great for us, is because there's a lot of alignment in the way we think, it seems like. So yeah, there's that.
Well, thanks for the time, Josh, in the interview, and